Catherine, are you on yet? I have a question for you. I was going to text you about something else. You're on.
Second one of these we've done. I guess that's a good sign because it means it's just sort of coming towards the end of the second round of internships that the guys at Solar Austin have put together. So first of all, welcome to everybody who's been part of that. It's nice to see a couple of old names that I recognize and some that I don't. I just want to start by sort of introducing myself and then jumping around. I'm going to ask a few other people to introduce themselves. There's a couple of my colleagues joining who I don't think everybody's met before. We've got a couple of new employees that have joined us. You probably recognize Alex. And then I'm also going to get Sarah to introduce herself. Oh, sorry. She's arrived, if you can hear my baby in the background there shouting. Yeah, I'll ask Sarah to introduce herself. Sarah's kindly, once again, sort of graced us with her presence. She works for 8 Minute Energy, and she's got a really cool sort of story and some really helpful practical tips as to how she got into the renewable energy industry, and ultimately that's why we're all here, right? So yeah, so I work for Piper Maddox. My name's John Paul Bramham. I'm named after John Lennon and my dad. That's how John Paul came around, if anybody's interested. Piper Maddox, we're a technical recruitment agency, and we specialize exclusively in renewable energy and clean tech is probably the best way to put it. So obviously that includes solar, as you'd expect, but also includes wind, energy storage, electric vehicles and charging infrastructure. And we do have another discipline that we call grid edge technology. It doesn't really mean anything to anybody outside our business, but it's everything else that is covered within clean technology. So energy efficiency, microgrid solutions, smart grid solutions, things like that. So yeah, I've been with the business now 4 years or so, just coming up to 4 years, and love working in renewable energy. My background was previously recruiting into oil and gas, if I'm allowed to say those words on here in this company. Got very disillusioned with that world from a, just from a perspective of, it was just money, right? And I know that sounds really flippant, but ultimately it was dealing with people who were only interested in making dollars and cents. And one of my favorite things about our industry is that everybody's interested in making a difference, and that's really cool. So yeah, that's a little bit about myself. There's a couple of people on the call, Miss Adrian actually, who has recently joined Piper Maddox. She's going to tell us a little bit about her story, similar to Sarah, how she made the move from, graduating fairly recently and then moving into renewable energy. Alex Smith, who some of you may recognize, and then Amanda Heller, who I think was on the last call, the kickoff one we did, and then Miss Chloe England, who, like myself, is a fellow Brit. Not that makes her my favorite or anything, but and she's recently joined us from our New York team, and she's one of the sort of high flyers when it comes to Piper Maddox and LHI Group as a business, and certainly at the forefront from our female contingent. So yeah, that is us. So Adrian, if you just want to introduce yourself first and then just go down the list.
Yeah, nice to meet y'all. So I work here at Piper Maddox, I'm in my home. I work at Piper Maddox with Chloe, Amanda, and JP. And JP, should I go into the full thing right now, or should I wait till later? Like my whole story of how I got into it?
You can kind of just for a little while.
Okay. So basically, I work in solar specifically on the perm side. So working on permanent full-time placements. And I work really closely with Chloe.
Cool. Alex, do you
want to go? I was going to say, should I say hi just because
Well, you go. Sorry, Clark.
Hi, everyone. So I've been with Piper Maddox for 2 years now. I was working in London for about 5 years, but my degree and my background was in geography, but a lot of what I specialized in at university was climate change. So I always wanted to work for a renewable energy headhunter or recruitment firm. So was offered the opportunity to move out to Piper Maddox in New York, where I built and ran our permanent energy storage team specifically. And that was across North America. And then over the past couple of weeks, I moved down to Austin. Well, 2 months ago now, I moved down to Austin to help build out our permanent recruitment division. A lot of what we're doing is focused locally here in Texas, but of course we do work with customers and candidates who are looking for roles across North America. And then Adrian is heading up our solar division specifically. A lot of what I still do is storage, because that's what I've done for the past couple of years. But we do still cover the different areas that JP mentioned. So wind, e-mobility, energy efficiency, grid edge, etc. So that's me.
So I'm Alex Smith, like the quarterback, making a great comeback. And I graciously got to be JP's first hire to help start up contracts for Piper Maddox in Austin. So I've been doing recruitment now for almost 2 years now with JP. Started out getting to work in a few different industries, and then basically after one promotion started doing a lot in solar, and that's where most of my focus was in for over the last year and a half probably. And now I've been promoted again to head up our contracts across a few different verticals, but solar is still my biggest passion. And yeah, now I think I might have been our first employee to go to Solar Austin and met Catherine, and yeah, just super excited to be in an organization to help out as much as we can.
Thanks, Alex. Amanda, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hey, I'm Amanda. I recently just graduated from Texas A&M back in December. Whoop. And so I came and joined Alex and JP's team with solar contracts. So that's kind of what I am specializing in. I started back in August, and I've just really loved it so far. So it's an exciting market to be in for sure.
Oh, thanks, Amanda. Not sure it was the right audience to be whooping A&M, but there you go. And then Sarah, if you'd like to just quickly introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Sarah Pendergast. I live in Austin. I grew up in the Midwest and bounced around the country a bit. I work at a company called 8 Minute Solar Energy. We build utility scale solar and storage projects. I'll talk a little bit more later about what that means. And I'm in the business side. It's called origination, which is basically sales. So a goal is to sell to Austin Energy, who you might get your power from. So we'll see. But I used to be in climate change policy and came to Texas to get my master's in business administration at UT.
Cool, thanks. And as Sarah mentioned, she's going to tell us, a lot more about her journey into renewable energy and particularly solar energy in a little while. And it's a really cool story, actually, and a lot of really helpful practical advice for you guys who are trying to make that move into the world of employment. So yeah, that's why we're all here, right? Is to actually talk about how we can ultimately best utilize the experience that you guys are gaining from being as part of this internship program. The reason why I've kind of drafted in some support, particularly with Adrian and Sarah being helpful, is in the UK we don't actually do internship programs. So this has been a wonderful learning experience for me being part of this program. But nonetheless, it's really important to now start thinking about how you go about getting a job, because getting a job is, in one sense, it's super easy, and in another sense, it's really, really difficult, particularly if you've got your sights set on a particular job, a particular company, a particular geography. The world is a very competitive place out there, and there's a whole bunch of people out there who are gunning for those same jobs. right? So what we're going to talk about is how to really make yourself stand out, how to make your application stand out. And you guys have already done one great thing, which is sign up for this internship program and ultimately shown employers that numerous things, right? Initiative is a big one. Passion is another one. We're going to talk about that word an awful lot over the course of the next hour or so. So yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit, first of all, about how you should frame this experience on your resume. So I know when we kicked this thing off, we did a bit of a resume writing clinic. I think at the time I mentioned that if anybody does ever want any individual or specific support on that, by all means reach out directly. Beryl will always share my contact and email details with anybody who's interested in that. And obviously that goes for anybody else on this call, Chloe, Amanda, Adrian, Alex, we're all happy to help on that front. But in terms of the actual practical side of it, I think, so sometimes it can be, it's really difficult to frame the experience that you've gained. And I always kind of joke to my friends on a personal level that when it comes to writing my own resume, I'm an absolute disaster. But writing somebody else's resume is really easy. Sorry about this. Hang on. Hi. Can you be quiet, please? So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of really practical things that you can do that are going to help you stand out. And first and foremost, the thing I would really want you to bear in mind and take away from this call is that anytime you talk about your experience in your internship program, talk about what you have done. So it's what you find is that people tend to think that we should A, be a little bit humble on our resumes, and B, we should talk about team, because if you talk about team, it means you're a team player. So you'll see a lot of people will write, we did this, or I was part of a team that did this. And that's all great, but really an employer wants to know what you did because they want to know what you're going to bring to their company, right? So they're not employing the team that you were part of, they're employing you, the individual, right? So don't be afraid to talk about the specific parts of the project that you helped on. So I'm gonna pick on somebody here. I'm gonna pick on Joshua because I've spoken to Joshua a couple of times and I've sort of got an idea of what his background is. But Joshua, when you were on your internship program, just give me a quick snapshot of the sort of things you were working on, if you could, please.
Right. So with the first internship I had through this program, which was at 7X Solar Energy, my responsibilities were post-processing all the data that so Rich Clark would bring to me, via just email. My other tasks included just working on doing site studies for a particular site we were looking at. That meant just estimating how much energy we're going to get out of an area, given its geographical location and all the temperature and weather data. And also I worked on 3 individual projects where my task was to sort of model the bifacial gain, if we were to artificially sort of change the albedo of a land. Also, I looked at the feasibility of going to floating solar for 7X. And there was a third project I worked on, but I'm not allowed to talk about that. But that basically sums up what I was doing at 7X.
Awesome, thank you. And sorry to put you on the spot there. But I don't know if you all picked up on that, but what Joshua did there was exactly how he should write that on his resume. My responsibilities were, I did this. I was, conducting feasibility studies. How he read that is how your resume should read, right? So straight away, that was super impressive. That experience that he got was really, really valuable and tangible and very practical. So if I'm an employer and I read that from Joshua, and I look and I go, okay, I know exactly what Joshua is doing. I know what he's capable of. I know what his experience is. Awesome. I want to interview this guy. Right. So that's the first and most practical piece of advice I can give you when it comes to putting this on your resume. I think the other thing, you know, and I've definitely learned this since I've been in the US. Like I say, it's not something that we do in the UK, but I've been here a while now. And I think I get the sense that there can be a bit of a reluctance to people from people to include internship programs on resumes, because it's not paid employment, right? And a resume is an employment history. But I think, you know, the feedback that we get from employers, and certainly the feedback I've got from speaking to people through this program, is you should 100% include that on your resume as though it was a job, right? So it should be there front and center. It should be the absolute top of your employment history. It's the most recent thing you've done, and it's hands down the most relevant thing. I think the other thing that I want you to think about when you put in that experience on your resume is no detail is too small, right? So when we did this first time around, we talk about resume, you know, how long your resume should be. We're ideally looking for somewhere between 1.5 to 2.5 pages. With the greatest respect in the world, you guys are not at the point where you can fill out 2.5 pages of a resume. It's almost impossible, right? Unless you're going to go into every single element of your coursework and all that, which you hopefully would never do based on the first conversation we had. But so don't be afraid to really dig deep into what it was you were doing and from a day-to-day basis, because ultimately your resume should kind of mirror a job description in a lot of ways. And when you read a job description, there's a whole heap of bullet points of what your day-to-day responsibilities were. And really good job descriptions go into the kind of minutiae of the detail of what will be expected of you. And again, you're at a point in your careers, you're at the very start of it, where you've got the liberty to go into that amount of detail. So try wherever possible to have it kind of, you know, imagine if you're an electrical engineer, for example, your duties should kind of look like a job description of an electrical engineer, right? That's what you want people to see. Again, we talk about this first time around. Your resume is purely there to get you an interview. That's its sole purpose, is for somebody to read it and go, yes, this person looks like they can do this job. I want to speak to them. So show people you can do the job. So that's a sort of first section of this, and probably the most boring section of this workshop. There's not much else from a practical perspective that you can do. I suppose, first of all, I'll throw that open. Does anybody have any questions around anything when it comes to resumes and making sure you've got everything on there?
I have a question.
Fire away.
So I've been given advice before to quantify anything that you do where appropriate, but what would you say about quantifying it when it's maybe not a super impressive number necessarily? So I guess say if you were I don't know, the leader of some type of organization, but membership numbers weren't super high, I guess, or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. So my advice would be to take it within context. So, for example, if it's something where you've gone out of your way to try and create a community that's extracurricular, for example, it's not necessarily directly related to the job function, then any part of that's impressive, because you're showing the initiative and the drive to do something that's beyond your paid employment. And I think that's really a really valuable skill to bring, and a valuable trait to bring to an organization. Now, if, for example, I'm supposed to flip that round, like I work in recruitment, which is a sales job, and let's say the accepted, norm in my industry is to make 15 placements in a year, and I only make 5, but I know the norm is to make 15 and I've underperformed, then that information from a quantitative perspective, I would withhold from my resume, right? Because I'm showing that I'm not performing to what the industry standard might be. Again, flip side, if I've excelled on it, I would do. But if I say, you know, if I'm in recruitment and I say, well, I've set up, like I'm an expat, right? So I've set up an expat networking group within renewable energy that has gone from, you know, 3 members to 15 members in the last 12 months. Okay, that's, you know, only 12 members, but it's not only 12 members. It's something that I didn't have to do. I've gone out of my way to do it. I've shown my own initiative, shown that I'm passionate about what I'm working in. That's a positive for me. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No worries. Any others? Cool. Right, so in terms of the workshop element, I'm going to break it up slightly, and we're going to have Miss Prendergast tell us all about her journey into solar energy, if that's okay, Sarah, at this juncture, just to sort of break it up. And then after that, Adrian will tell you a little bit about her journey into renewable energy. And then we'll finish off by talking about how you guys can sort of help market yourselves a little bit better. And I want to talk to you about just a few sort of practical tips that you can do just in and around the internships that you're in, and how you can best put yourselves out there, basically.
And how much time should I take so I don't go too long or too short?
As much as you like, Sarah. As much as you like. I think your story is super fascinating, and there's some really great practical advice that the guys can take from it. So, yeah, as much as you need.
Okay. And I'm gonna paste something in the chat. Oops, did that not happen? Okay. One is a link to Google form, and one or Google folder, and one is my email address. I'm happy to read resumes or practice networking or whatever. I really want good people in this industry. So yeah, so I'm going to share my screen in case that visual is helpful, and I'll be quick. I got your note, Beryl. Thank you. Okay, cool. Does that look weird, or does it look like a solar farm? Fine. Okay. Well, hi. So I work at a company called 8 Minute Solar Energy. It takes 8 minutes for the sunlight to get to Earth. That's where that name comes from. And if you have any questions, feel free to jump in or in the chat, and I can answer after. I am in origination, which is a word unique to electricity. It's the same as business development or sales. And I'm in utility scale solar, and that means different from residential rooftop or commercial. Utility scale is giant fields, like 1,000 acres of solar panels. This is a project we finished this summer called Whole Scene. It's out in West Texas. It generates enough power to power 40,000 homes. So there's different, you can choose what you want to do within solar. A little bit about my career path. Like, I'm in my 30s, and I know going into a job, I was paranoid about picking a career and having to like what I should do. And I've had 3 careers at this point, and I'm happy with that choice. And so after one, I just kind of decided I wanted to try something else and pivoted. So I taught, I was in policy, and then now I'm in the business side. I'll tell you a little bit about my background and then how I navigated getting into the career and getting the job I wanted. So I went to Michigan and studied environmental policy and got a bachelor's of arts, and did some student clubs, kind of like someone just mentioned, like organizations outside of the classroom, and then some internships while I was there. I taught high school for 4 years and GED classes for another year in math and science, and then did some volunteer work around sustainability in the summers and hosted our Go Green Club with my high schoolers. I moved to DC and did policy work with a couple nonprofits and the government Grid Alternatives is someplace I volunteered, and I mentioned this a second ago, but volunteer work was one thing that I actually put on my resume as I wanted to get into solar, is that I said I volunteered and did a solar installation. Grid Alternatives is not in Texas, but Habitat for Humanity in Texas does some solar installations for free if you're interested. And then I decided I wanted to build some solar projects and switch to the private sector. And so I went back and got my master's in business administration, or MBA, here at UT. And I interned at Renewable Energy Systems. They have offices here, but I interned in Colorado, and then finished school and got a full-time job here. I actually got my full-time job through a recruiter, so someone like a Piper Maddox was a competitor of theirs, but they reached out to me on LinkedIn because I had my LinkedIn page updated with my summer internship and my experience, and so someone just sent me a message, and that's how I got my job. Oh, this is not helpful, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I don't know how to do that. Okay, and a little bit about my current role, and then about how I navigated it. I currently do about a third of my time is building relationships. So I go to conferences, or this time go to virtual conferences, and meet people at utility companies or big tech companies who want to buy solar power. So what I do is I have lunch with them and talk to them what they want. And it's all people who are super excited about solar and super excited about finding solutions to climate change. So I find it fun and interesting. I'm more of an introvert, but because of the topic areas I'm really passionate about, I'm able to have those conversations with people, and that makes my job fun too, because it's stuff I care about. Another third is sitting at my desk by myself and putting together proposals. So it means putting together a Word document with the price of our project, why we're a good company, our experience, and some other information, engineering information, for example, to then give to those tech companies or give to the utilities to say, you should buy our project, that they then read. So that's more my introvert tendencies, is that I get to be by myself behind a computer. And then the last third is working with all the different departments at my company to figure out the best ways to develop and sell our projects. So I work with engineers all the time. I work with finance people, with other business people, and then we have a lot of real estate. So we have to get 1,000 acres of land to build our project. So we have real estate people too. So I like that because I get exposed to a lot of different things at my job. And let's see. Okay, and then how did I get into my role? I knew going in, I kind of showed this with the screen, that I did a bunch of different things in my career, and then in high school and college to try and figure out what I wanted. But I knew I cared about environmental things. And then in my mid-20s to late 20s, I knew I wanted to work in solar specifically, because I just would find myself standing on, I was on a roof one day in DC watching fireworks, and I looked around and there were solar panels on the roof next to me, and it just got me super excited. So I thought if I could do that for a full-time job, it'd be like a happier life. But my parents worked regular civil service jobs. Like my dad was in special ed, my mom worked for the government, my grandparents worked retail, and I really had no connection to the industry, so that kind of scared me about what I should do. But I knew I cared about it, and so what I did is I attended a lot of conferences, reached out to a lot of alumni of, I went to Michigan, so kind of like UT, there's a ton of alumni. Just cold reached out to them and said I was passionate about renewable energy, wanted to talk to them about their jobs. And I honestly just read and listened to a lot of podcasts to learn about the industry. It's small enough that you can kind of network and learn about it and get intel on what job openings there are and what companies are good to work for, and where to find job postings. So that's kind of how I navigated getting in. And then the other piece was internships. So through that networking, like my Renewable Energy Systems internship that I got was through UT alumni. She was the vice president at that company, and my professor recommended me to talk to her. So your professors are great connections too. Like I didn't have any family connections, so that was another way I went. I think that's it. Oh, the other thing I wasn't sure about was what type of job function I wanted. I had a hard time knowing what they actually meant. Like the origination word, I'd never heard before I was looking for internships. So the way I figured out what type of role I wanted was to first identify what skills I like to use and what I like to do in my day-to-day. And then two, I looked at job descriptions and talk to a bunch of people. So I mentioned I'm more of an introvert, so I knew I didn't want to do like a door-to-door sales or a bunch of presentations because that would give me too much anxiety. But I was really interested in this stuff and knew I liked having more one-on-one conversations. So some kind of relationship building job would be a good fit for me. The other piece was I knew I wanted to do some math or quantitative, but I didn't want to be in a spreadsheet all day long, which I would guess Joshua's in a spreadsheet most of the day, and my finance colleagues are in a spreadsheet all day long. So I have a little bit of that. Like I said, I put together a Word document and a spreadsheet for my proposals, but I have a mix of the two. So that's kind of what I was looking for, a personality fit. And to be honest, I would just search on Indeed or pick a company like SunPower here in town or use my company and just read their job descriptions to see what the responsibilities are, to see if you're qualified to do that and if you'd like doing that. And push a little bit with qualifications. They can be aspirational. You can get them through volunteer work or for your internship. So don't like rule it out if you're not, if you don't feel confident about your qualifications, but if you think that you would be able to do those things. Any questions, or Beryl or JP, anything that I said before that would be helpful to highlight?
No questions?
Okay.
Cool. No,
Well,
thanks for
feel
that,
free to reach
Sarah.
out. And I really love this industry, and I think this is like my long-term career. It's always going to be interesting and changing. And yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. So I hope everybody finds that useful. I think what I really love about Sarah's story is like how proactive she was. Like she recognized and identified an industry that she was passionate about. And again, there's that word passion, right? And then went ahead and used her own initiative. There's, as she said, like no connections within the industry, a self-admitted introvert, and still managed to carve out the exact career that she wanted through doing that. I think that's what's brilliant about solar and renewable energy in general is people are so willing to help other people because we've all got this like really noble common goal that we're all working to. And it's something that I've noticed, and Adrian will talk a little bit about this in a moment, is I work in sales. Like we're almost 100% sales focused. And I come from a country where, and Chloe will back me up here, recruiters aren't thought of very highly in the UK, believe it or not. And we would regularly get told in very unpolite terms to go away and no thanks, I'm not interested, although the language would be slightly more colorful at times. And here people really recognize the value because people want to be helped, and that's what, there's a big shift for me when I made the move from oil and gas to renewable energy. That was my biggest takeaway, was how helpful people were and how much people enjoy talking about what they do. Sarah mentioned there, like she's comfortable one-on-one, and she's comfortable in situations that ordinarily she might not be, because she's talking about a subject that she genuinely cares about, and that makes all the difference. And it's it's a massive cliche, but, and I'm not sure I totally buy into this statement, but supposedly, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That is I don't know if that's a term in the US, but it is in the UK. And that rings true, right? I think Sarah's story is testament to that. And she clearly loves what she does. She's willing to, to give up her evening to speak to a bunch of people that she'd never met before and offer help and advice and everything else. And that's amazing, right? So yeah, I love that story. That's the second time I've heard it, and it still brings a smile to my face. So cool, thank you. So yeah, Adrian, if you would like to, I guess, follow suit, slightly different career path, slightly different journey to get there, but yeah, sure, there's some valuable insights nonetheless.
Okay, yeah. So when I got into college, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was juggling nutrition, photography, social work, psychology, literally just had no clue. And then I remember listening to a professor talk about the brain in psychology, and I got super fascinated. So really honed in on that and ended up taking a personality psychology class with her and being so interested in it. It felt like it was a hobby more than it was just like school. And I'm sure y'all felt that way in certain areas where like, wow, this doesn't even feel like work. This feels like pleasure, just like studying something that's so enjoyable. But after that, this professor who ended up being like one of my mentors, she ended up inviting me into this personal study where we looked at happiness, like what brings people happiness, what are the myths and truths about happiness. And then after that, I ended up auditing her class at UT on social psychology. I ended up meeting her teaching assistant, and he was like, "Hey, do you want to work in a lab?" And if it had anything to do with studying the brain, I was down. So I was like, yeah, of course. So I started working in this positive psychology lab. It was super interesting. And then from there, I thought, well, the only downside to this is that when you work in a lab, people are more like statistics than, actual people. And I loved working with people. I'm one of 9 kids. I'm part of this huge family, and I just love being around people and like working with people. So I ended up thinking, well, I want to get into like the clinical side of psychology, but I couldn't find a job that would let me do it. So I just basically decided I was going to go door to door and find different psychology clinics and see if they would give me a chance to be like a secretary, um, shadow, anything. So I literally went to all these clinics, and they're all like, oh, you're an undergrad, like you don't have any experience, you can't work with us. And I remember like feeling discouraged. And 2 weeks later, I thought, oh, there was this one clinic that the person at the front desk wasn't there, so I should just give him a call, just to cover my ground. So I gave him a call, and they were like, yeah, we're hiring for a psychometrist. I had no clue what a psychometrist was, but I was like, oh, I'll absolutely sign me up. So I ended up going in for this interview, and they were like, why do you want to work for us? And I was just like, because I'm so passionate about the brain. I'm so passionate about psychology. They're like, well, we just hire PhD students. Like, you don't have enough experience. But I just tried to meld my previous experience, whether it was like classes that I took that were interactive, my work in the lab, all of that, to prove like if you give me a chance, I will get the job done because I'm so passionate about this area of work. So they took a risk, they hired me, and I ended up working in, it's neuropsychology, but basically what I would do is map people's brains all the time and figure out where all their strengths and weaknesses lied. So like look at their IQ, their memory, their attention, their personality, all of that. So I did that for a few years and I loved it. And then I got to a point where I felt like I was kind of on cruise control and I felt like I needed more stimulation, like I needed another challenge. Um, and I was also struggling when it came to my student loans, which I'm sure y'all can all relate to an extent. My parents having 9 kids, they were like, we love you, but like we'll emotionally support you, but financially you're on your own. So I was like, okay, this isn't really paying the bills here. So I ended up just randomly getting into recruitment, but it was tech recruitment. So I worked for this company for about a year in tech recruitment. And I thought, there's 2 sides to recruitment. There's the sales side and there's a consulting side, which is so people oriented. It's understanding how people tick, understanding their motivations, all of that, which aligns so closely with psychology. Then there's a sales side where it's like fill a role, make the commission, yada, yada. And I just knew I couldn't grow with that particular company because it was difficult from a culture perspective. They didn't really value diversity and they didn't really value, people kind of like challenging the status quo. And I wanted to be engaged in a company that really valued that. So I ended up leaving that company, but thinking like there is something to recruitment that I really enjoy that I could see myself circling back to. So I rejoined the clinic, took on a management role, and honestly, like I worked in that role up until August. And when everything happened with like George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, I just had such an epiphany. I was like, it's wild to me that a massive organization like the police department could have their entire reputation affected by these bad hires that they made, and not really understanding who would be a good fit for their company, and what that looked like beyond just like their technical skills. So I got really interested in the idea of, potentially merging my experience in neuropsychology, finding out where people's strengths and weaknesses lied, and getting back into recruitment. And, I kind of stumbled upon LHI. But what really sold me was when I was talking to Jack, our VP, and Chloe about renewable energy. It's like, there's one really cool aspect about getting to do what you love on a day-to-day basis when it comes to your job itself. But there's something on the flip side that's so much more meaningful in being involved in an organization and a cause that will forever have long-term effects and impact our whole planet. And that's renewable energy. And I think technology is cool. Like, having worked in recruitment and tech was great. But I knew that if I entered into the world of renewable energy, I felt like I could truly merge all of my passions into like helping companies in renewable energy find good talent beyond just what their resume look like, but also being in an industry that values like the health of our planet. So, after I interviewed with them, and honestly, guys, I was just so straightforward about like where I was coming from, what I was passionate about. And then when they hired me, I talked to Jack, one of our other VPs, and he was like, I hired you because I could just tell you were passionate about it. You wanted to be a consultant. And so I think that, I guess, like the common theme of my job experiences since college has been, once you hone in what you're passionate about and you can back that up with like, not data, but just like, examples as to like how you can correlate your previous skill sets to that, and you speak on that level, like semi-vulnerable, but really let them understand who you are and what drives you. I think that can open up so many doors, even if you're an underdog. And that's something that I realized with, neuropsychology. Like, I went to this happy hour one time with my old bosses, and they're like, we shouldn't have hired you, but you were just so passionate about wanting to do the work that we gave you a chance. So, I think sometimes it's easy to look like an underdog on a piece of paper, but when you get the chance to like speak about how this correlates with what your motivators are as a person, it can just be so powerful and open up so many doors. So yeah, that's my story.
I was just going to add one thing here, is that obviously I interviewed Adrienne before she started with us, and she didn't have renewable energy experience, although she had some recruitment experience. But just to echo what she said, the reason why we were so excited for her to join was because of how passionate she was through that whole interview process, how much you could really feel that she wanted it. So if I had any advice, it would be just to make sure that that is really coming across, and that is genuine when you're going through those interview processes.
Cool. Thanks, ladies. Yeah, so there's a bit of I don't know if you guys picked up on that. There's a little sort of common theme running through both Sarah and Adrienne's experience, and it's ultimately that they've landed in spots that they weren't necessarily always on the path to do so. And Sarah's kind of touched on it when she spoke, when she took different elements of what she enjoyed doing and then ultimately found the role that she felt was right for her. And Adrienne there spoke about how she kind of stumbled upon recruitment, but upon discovering it, realized that she can meld all these different elements of what she's good at. And I think it's really important to remember, and kind of one of the points that I want to stress within, the next steps of your guys' career, or at least the first steps of your guys' career, is that you are not tethered to your area of studies by any stretch of the imagination. You might think, You major as an engineer, an electrical engineer, and that means that you are forever destined to work within engineering. And that's certainly not the case. One of my best friends in Houston is the VP of global sales for Sulzer Pumps, who are the world's largest industrial pump manufacturer. He's a mechanical engineer by education, and he works purely in sales now, and has carved out an amazing career for himself. I think it's really important to bear that in mind when you look at renewable energy and solar energy as a career path. I always tell the story about how when I first moved into oil and gas, I just thought that people drilled a hole in the ground and oil came out and we caught it, and then you put it in your car and your cars go. Like, sort of that rudimentary. And similarly with solar, like, you think, well, they, stick a wind turbine in the air and it spins and you get electricity. Like, there's so much more that goes into it. Sarah will tell you that, within origination and development, you can spend 3, 4, 7 years plus taking a project from, hey, maybe, the data here looks good, we can potentially build a project here, to this project is generating power for us. And the amount of steps that are in that process, and the amount of people it takes to get that project from a concept to a generating facility is just massive. And there's so many career opportunities within that. So I want you guys to all think about, what it means to you to have a job and get job satisfaction out of that. Does it mean that I'm an electrical engineer undergrad, so I'm going to be an electrical engineer? Maybe it does. Conversely, you may think, well, I'm an engineer and I'm very mechanically minded and I'm good with numbers, but also I love interacting with people and I don't just want to have my head in a spreadsheet all day. There's absolutely a career path for you within this industry, regardless of how you choose to go down that. So that's definitely an important point to remember. There's another point that Adrian raised there that I really want to talk about, and this is really pertinent when it comes to the internship program, is I want you guys to think about the message and the sort of vibe that you're putting out there to your employers. I don't know if what do you call the other side of if you're the intern, the company that you're interning with, I don't know. Think about how you're positioning yourself to those guys, right? Adrian just said the word. She said, if you put yourself out there and you're a little bit vulnerable, people will pick up on that. So I suppose, if I was to ask any of you guys, your manager who you work with on a day-to-day basis, do they know, if I called them up right now and said, hey, Mr. Manager, you've been mentoring and looking after Jason for the last 4 months. Do you know what Jason wants to do following this internship? Do you know if he would like to work with your company? Has he enjoyed his experience? Would he be willing to take a job with you if you took it? Does he aspire to work with your company? Does that person know that? And they should, right? You should not be afraid if you're really happy with the organization you're working with, and you see yourself in that organization longer term, tell the people. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there. You've heard 2 stories there about people taking chances on people who weren't necessarily qualified for the exact role they were going for, but they were able to articulate why they felt they could be good. Sarah mentioned about, aspiring to qualifications, right, that are on job descriptions as opposed to having them in hand. I remember a couple of years ago, we had a lady come in and speak in our New York office. Her name is Georgina Yellowlees, if you ever want to look her up on LinkedIn. She is Amazon's youngest director globally. She has direct access to Jeff Bezos. although I shouldn't really say his name. It's like Lord Voldemort, isn't it? But anyway, she's fairly high up in her early 30s, Amazon's youngest global director. And she started out life as a recruiter, and she, weirdly enough, she's a family friend of our HR director, and she came in to talk about her career progression. And she said something that'll stick with me till the end of my career. And my wife is another living example of this. She has never gotten a job that she was ever qualified for. She was always pushed into that job because she showed the traits of being good at that job. My wife's a director of HR for a power services company, and if she tried to get a job as a HR director in another company, she would get blown out of the water by every other resume that she goes up against, because they'll all have 15 years more experience than her on paper. But in reality, she can do that job, and she does it very, very well. Georgina's the same. Adrian just told you a story about how she sat in front of a company and got a job that she didn't even know what it was. Right, because she was able to articulate how passionate she was about it. That's such a valuable lesson, right? I want you guys to think about putting yourselves out there, telling people what you want. I'm going to pick on Chloe here. I'm going to maybe share some personal information about Chloe, but Chloe's got quite ambitious growth plans for herself over the next 12 months. If she hadn't told me that as her manager, I would never know what I need to work on with her in order to get her to where she wants to be. So I might sit here thinking, oh, Chloe's doing really well. She's really happy in her career. And Chloe's sat there thinking, oh God, I'm doing okay, but I really want to build my own team out and grow the division and take over this, that, and the other. And eventually Chloe leaves my business because I'm not offering that opportunity, and I never knew. And yes, there is absolutely a responsibility on my shoulders as a manager, but there's just as much responsibility on her shoulders to tell me what she wants out of her career. And I want you guys to think about that in the positions that you're in. You've got direct access to the people who will make the hiring decisions. You're currently all doing a really great job and impressing them, right? Why would you not then say, hey, if there was an opportunity arose, when this is over, I'd love to work here. And your manager might go, oh my goodness, really? I thought you were, reasonably happy, but I had no idea. You've done such a great job. Of course, we'd love to hire you, right? So definitely think about that in terms of positioning yourselves and how you sort of, that's what I mean by market yourself, right? Don't be afraid to put yourselves out there. Just going to sort of wrap this up. I don't know if anybody's got any questions once I've finished. I do want to sort of just finish on one point that's really important to bear in mind. I know, Joshua, you and I have spoken about this directly, but in terms of resource, and this sort of goes hand in hand with what we were saying about helping people, is Piper Maddox is a resource for you guys now. The most value we can add to you guys is our networks. It's our job to be well networked. And as Adrian said, certainly her and Chloe are focusing very much on the local Austin and local Texas markets. So when you complete your studies and you are looking for a job, should you wish to, and it's entirely optional, of course, by all means, reach out to us. I don't know if you guys know how we work, but we get paid when we place people. And it's based on that person's salary, right? It's a percentage that the company will pay us. With you guys, what we're basically doing is waiving any fees that we would be due to basically help promote you guys out into the local solar market. So it's, like I say, it's basically just an opportunity to take advantage of our networks. Like I say, Joshua and I have spoke about this, just being practical and giving you some practical feedback on that. Obviously, the only time we can do that is once you graduated and you are available for full-time employment. But by all means, keep in touch. Anything you need, like I say, Beryl will share all our email addresses and whatnot, resume tips, interview tips. Like I say, any advice you need on just general job seeking or anything, we're here for you. So yeah, I'll just throw it out there. If anybody's got any final questions before we wrap this up and let you all get on with your evening. Cool. Right, Beryl, over to you.
Thank you so much, JP.
Shall I just talk on your behalf? Beryl says, thanks everybody for doing such a good job on the internship program. You're all doing great. And thanks to Piper Maddox for some semi-useful advice, hopefully. And thanks to Sarah and Adrian for sharing their stories with us and putting themselves out there. So yeah, does that about sum it up, Beryl? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Okay, cool. Right, guys, well, thanks again for your time. Again, if anybody needs us, you know where we are. Feel free to reach out and have a wonderful holiday period.
Bye. Thanks, everyone.